In our nation, we don't follow, we lead. We don't wait for permission, we move first. So while others talk about AI, Booz Allen puts it in space. That's right, in space. Because real leadership, it's about building what nobody else can. Coding so we can't lose. Making America stronger, safer, faster. It's in our code. Find out more at boozallen.com/ourcode.
Hey, it's Matt from Morton's Power Equipment. Got a yard to tame or a job to tackle? We've got big name brands you trust. Toro, Steel, Bobcat, and Skag. Whether you need mowers, blowers, trimmers, chainsaws, or tractors, we've got the local sales, parts, and service to keep your equipment running strong all year long. And if you need expert advice, we've got that too. Stop by our showroom at 4 Mile Fork or visit us online at mortonspower.com. Get the gear, the service, and get to work with Morton's Power Equipment.
Welcome to this week's Harness Racing Alumni Show.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show with your hosts, Freddie Hudson and Trade Martin.
Brought to you by the Meadowlands Racetrack and Hunterton Farms. Visit www.playmeadowlands.com. Hunterton Farms will be selling their consignment at the Lexington Selected Sale September 29th through October 3rd. Hunterton Farms, www.huntertonfarms.com. I'm Freddie Hudson, and I'm here today with Trade Martin and Bob Marks. On today's show, I'm going to, I guess, give a history lesson about Roosevelt Raceway. This year, on September 2nd, would mark the 85th anniversary of Roosevelt Raceway had it stayed open. Roosevelt Raceway was founded by George Morton Levy and Bob Johnson. Levy and Johnson in 1929 had started the Greyhound racing at the Mineola Fairgrounds, which also conducted harness racing. That is how they got acquainted with harness racing, watching the racing over at the Mineola Fairgrounds. They had a form of bedding there on the Greyhounds, and they were, under constant threat of being closed down. In 1936, Roosevelt Raceway opened as an auto track for the reissuance of the Vanderbilt Cup. The land that they acquired by lease was Unit 2 of the Roosevelt Field Airport. That's the site of the runway from which Charles Lindbergh took off in the spirit of St. Louis. The races were conducted for 1936 and 1937, and the Indian car races ended due to the World War II. The European drivers were unable to attend. In 1938, George Morton Levy was working with the thoroughbreds, politicians, and some organized crime figures to get parimutuel racing legalized in the state of New York. And in 1938, he and Johnson closed the dog track, and they leased Roosevelt Raceway. They made a half-mile track, dirt oval. They put lighting in. They added betting windows, and they had midget car races there for the 1938 and 1938 seasons with the same type of bedding that they had used on the dogs. In late 1939, the parimutuel bill in New York was passed, and in late 1939, the Old Country Trotting Association was formed. In early 1940, the New York Racing Commission was formed, and the Old Country Trotting Association did some improvements to Roosevelt Raceway, and on September 2nd, Roosevelt Raceway conducted its first race ever. A crowd of about 5,000 to about 40,000 showed up. Introduced that first meet was single heat racing, program with fast lines, and racing at night. The track had racing through World War II, with the exception of 1943, where the racing was canceled. One of the difficulties in harness racing at that time was the multiple recalls. So on May 24th, 1946, Levy at Roosevelt Raceway solved that problem with the introduction of the mobile starting gate. It revolutionized harness racing. Due to the track's success from 1946 to 1956, where the average attendance grew from in 1946 of 9,600 per night to 1956, where the nightly average was 19,000 per night. In 1957, the New York track opened, or the new track opened, and the nightly attendance soared with the average attendance from 1957 to 1971 was over 20,000 per night. During its heyday, the track featured such races as the Messenger Pace, the American Trotting Championship, the Roosevelt Futurity, and the biggest one, the Roosevelt Raceway International, with the Challenge Cup following the next week. The popularity of Roosevelt Raceway started to decline in the early 1970s due to many reasons. Some of them are the lottery, the Meadowlands opening in 1976, competition with the Nets, Islanders, and Mets, cable TV being introduced, Atlantic City opening, scandals of race fixing, the death of George Martin Levy, and the big one, a drop in the paid revenue to the state. The payout to the state dropped from $31 million in 1976 to $4.5 million in 1986. The track conducted its last race on June 15th, 1988. During its time, there was no track like it. The track was so ahead of its time. Phanoscope, they invented in 1955. You're going to ask, what is Phanoscope? It was a closed-circuit TV that projected races on a 20-foot screen that was placed next to the tote board, so fans could actually watch the races on a big screen. They were the first sport to do a live telecast. They conducted computerized dating games at the track. Then the races were nightly televised on several of the networks. The International, let's talk about that for a second. It was a 3-week event that would start with the American Trotting Championship, then the International Trot, and then it would finish with the Challenge Cup. The track was a celebrity magnet. You had baseball players, basketball players, football players, hockey players from the Jets, Mets, Yankees, Giants, Islanders, Knicks, and the Nets. Celebrities, movie stars, singing stars, boxers, you name it, they were there. An episode of the I Love Lucy TV show was filmed at Roosevelt Raceway. Here's a list of some of the celebrities that that includes Ronan Martin of Laugh-In, Jules Villemere, not only a New York Ranger, but he was also a harness driver that raced at Roosevelt. Charlie Keller from the Yankees, Lou Penner from the Yankees, boxer Jack Dempsey, James Cagney, Mickey Mantle, Whitey Ford, Ed Sullivan, George Steinberg, Milton Berle, Bob Hope, Mickey Rooney, Debbie Reynolds, Tina Louise. Tina Louise actually did a GOAT presentation. Telly Savalas, Shirley Jones, Sugar Ray Robinson, Cab Calloway, George Foreman, Joe Klecko of the Jets, Jerry Kuzman, Ed Kranepool, Ron Swoboda of the Nets, Joe Namath, Zsa Zsa Gabor, Walt Michaels, head coach of the New York Jets, Joey Heatherton, who had a party one time. I had the pleasure of driving her home to her Manhattan apartment. And there are many, many others. Now we also had presidents that had visited Roosevelt Raceway. We had Lyndon B. Johnson, John Kennedy, and Ronald Reagan. Now, Johnson visited Roosevelt Raceway twice. Once as vice president, where I have a picture of him cutting the harness rider's cake, and the other time as president of the United States. The time that he visited as president of the United States, they had 2 races. They had a Democrat race and a Republican race with presentations from each party for the winner of that race afterwards. Some of our sport's greatest drivers called Roosevelt home. Way too many to mention, but here's some. Clint Hodgins, Henry and Dick Thomas, Wayne Smart, Joe O'Brien, John Simpson Sr., Hugh Bell, Billy Hudson, Stanley, Harold Vernon, Sonny, and Donald Dancer, Billy and Peter Houghton, George Phelan, George Schulte, Buddy Gilmore, Del Insco, John Chapman, Carmine Abatello, Herbe and Henry Filion, Lucien Fontaine, Benny Webster, Butch Dokie, Norman DePlace, Bill and Frank Popfinger, Teddy Wing, Bill O'Donnell, Eddie Lohmeyer, Jimmy Barone, Mike LaChance, Sonny Patterson, Leo Bauer, Joe Marsh, John Campbell, Cat Manzi, and many, many others. Here's a couple of short stories. Now this one is kind of funny. Trainer Buck Norris is sleeping. Everyone used to take afternoon naps back then, and he gets a phone call. And the person asks him, how's Becky? He responds, well, she was a little lazy this morning, so I gave her a couple shots with the whip, and that straightened her right out. Total silence on the other end of the phone. It was his daughter's school calling to see how Becky, his daughter, was doing because she was homesick that day. Buck had a horse named Becky Bell, and he thought it was one of the owners calling to see how the horse was doing. Another good story, Jimmy Cruz had a goat that got loose and caused an accident on Old Country Road. The incident made the papers, and so Jimmy was worried that they'd be looking for the owner of the goat, so he hid the goat out for 2 weeks at my dad's barn. Nothing ever occurred of that, but that was kind of comical. And then here's a statement that Lucien Fontaine made. It was a fantastic feeling racing at Roosevelt Raceway. It was intimidating. After being there, you felt like you were part of history. It was a fantastic place. The lights and the noise of the crowd. Everyone in New York knew me. I would walk down the streets, and person after person would stop and ask for my autograph. It was just a great experience, the greatest ever. Everyone in harness racing wanted to race at Roosevelt Raceway. It was the major league of harness racing, said Lucien Fontaine. With that, I'm going to close the show out. I hope that you enjoyed our Roosevelt Raceway history lesson. Thanks to the Meadowlands and Huntington Farms for being our sponsors. That's a wrap for this week's show. Thanks for listening, and please join us again next week. And also, check us out on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you very much.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show